Hello, everyone. Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. I am joined today by Nicolas and Hugo. We're going to talk about Pedro Castillo. We're going to give our thoughts on how he's been performing as president of Peru. It's been about 2 months since Pedro Castillo has been acting as president, uh, and we've seen some articles discussing some disappointments and also articles discussing some satisfaction. But we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll introduce my guests here. We'll start with Hugo. How are you doing, man? First of all, I want to say thank you for helping me organize an event in DC to protest against an impending coup that could have happened in Peru, and to secure the votes of the indigenous people of Peru. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, and yeah, well, thank you for doing that, for putting that together. We had a really good showing, and yeah, it was awesome. It was great networking, and it's really important work. A little bit about myself. I studied down in St. Thomas University down in Florida. Over there, I interned for Debbie McCarcel-Powell. She's a establishment um, congresswoman who hasn't, isn't around anymore. She lost her reelection, and since then I've worked with CASA, an immigration rights organization, and we put a couple of actions together in the DC area.
Awesome. And we have Nicolas here. How are you doing, man?
Hey, thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure, an honor to be here. Frank Analysis, and um, I'm glad that there's platforms like yours who allow a different approach to politics, to news. In this corrupt, infested world that we live in when it comes
Yeah.
to the media. You know, you've had people like Jimmy Doron, people from the People's Party. So I think it's good, that people also like me, like Hugo, can have those opportunities, to start from the bottom and build our way up, in a manner that's not polluted by the traditional politics of big money and big interests. So yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
For sure, man. I always help out my Peruvian hermanos out there, who are trying to spread the truth to people about what's actually happening in the world. So first, I just want to say, if Pedro Castillo, by far, a better option than Keiko Fujimori, daughter of a dictator who wanted to establish right-wing policies. So I just want to hear some initial thoughts from you guys of what you guys think overall, how Pedro Castillo has been doing, and also what do you think that is going to happen to Keiko Fujimori? I know that she's been wanted for some corruption that was on her way. So what would you guys say?
Um, yeah, I mean, like you mentioned earlier, it's only been 2 months, but definitely just the victory has been huge. Electoral politics, although it's got its limited, I guess, gain, I feel like it's still been really important. Mainly, right? I feel like the right wings just dominated the politics in Peru for so long, and he's still going to be tied down, by the superstructures that are the institutions from Peru. Um, and in the 2 months I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll pass it over to Nico. Let me just get something really.
And Nico, what do you think?
Well, kind of on what Hugo, to build up on what he was saying. Yeah, they're the structures in Peru, all the institutions, have been kind of, how do you say, devoured for the
Mm-hmm.
past 30 years by the Fujimori regime, basically. Fujimori hasn't been around since the year 2000, but his legacy is like intact in the Peruvian political system because he framed a new constitution, the Constitution of 1993, in his own political image ideology, the neoliberalism. And then also the courts, he replaced all the courts with judges who were in of his own line who were at even very corrupt. Same thing with the military. He coped the whole military with generals and people in charge who are very far right. Even in Congress right now, we have one of the retired military members, Montoya, who's from that regime. Um, and same thing with all the other institutions. It's been very corrupt, and so Castillo or any president who really comes in, they have to deal with that enormous pressure, that and also the pressure of the economic powers. The big multinationals who have a lot of business interests in Peru, who are also colluded with the mass media. So really, he has an enormous challenge ahead, and it won't be easy. And one of the platforms actually that we propose, the new constitution, is kind of to do just that, because the constitution, it's basically the framework, the rules by which you run your nation. And if we have a certain framework that isn't beneficial for the people, then that must be changed. And same thing, as I was mentioning, when it came to corruption. The previous president Vizcarra, he did a lot of good things when it came to reforming the judicial system, the tribunals, the Consejo de la Magistratura, the magistrates, and all things like that. But there's still a lot of work to be done in that sense. I don't know what Hugo he'd like to add on to that.
Yeah, and I feel like that kind of points to like the importance of electoral politics because although there's all these superstructures that are going to limit Pedro Castillo and any leftist in government, um, even Vizcarra or before that PPK when they got in power, without those wins, you wouldn't be able to investigate and find all the corruption from Keiko Fujimori and the right wing parties like Fuerza Popular. So I feel like that's a you know that's one of the ways that it just becomes a little bit more in your face.
Yeah, it's a big uphill battle with the mainstream media machine, very similar to how it is here in the States. Any politician that is a little shows a little bit of anti-establishment, the mainstream media is going to paint this person as a radical, and that's how they were painting Pedro Castillo. But also, it doesn't it makes it a lot more difficult with the history of Peru, given what they went through with Sendero Luminoso. So I want to get you guys on that. Do you think that there was a lot of exaggeration in the media? And do you think did a lot of your family members or people that you know from Peru fall for a lot of the fear mongering that the mainstream news in Peru was doing?
Yeah, Hugo can go first.
Um, Definitely. I feel like one of the main tools that the right has used, not only in this electoral campaign, but previously as well, is terruqueo, which is, pretty much labeling anyone that's against the establishment and leftist as a terrorist or a terrorist sympathizer. And, I feel like during the last few years, that's had its limitations, but you still see it everywhere, even actually at the last protest that we organized. You had a bunch of
Oh, yeah.
right wingers calling us that, and I mean, like we grew up here in the U.S. We work amongst everyone here. We have no connections to this at all. Yet they're just so easily able to throw this out. Something that's
Exactly.
pretty powerful accusation.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. In the previous election, the 2016 election, the main left wing candidate was Veronica Mendoza. I'm actually part of her movement. I'm actually inscribed in her party, but officially we're not a party yet because there's like 8 steps you gotta like go through, and they're taking forever to to make us a official party. But in the 2016 election, one of the main points to smear her was saying that she had links to terrorism and to Venezuelan dark money, and so basically even in my own family, my father and my mother, and especially my father, when he was a university student in San Marcos, he really confronted the Sendero people. And so when Veronica came along, at first he had some doubts, and then eventually, even though he's not necessarily a left winger, he realized that this was a tactic that really got to people, that really scared people away. And he told me, a few months ago, he was like, I don't think that she's a terrorist or anything like that, but a lot of people in our families, they fall for that. They will believe that. And in fact, yeah, like later on when I asked my grandparents, my aunts, uncles, all of them, they were very frightened about her. Then obviously this time she didn't win, and the second round was between Pedro Castillo and Keiko, and with Pedro Castillo, same thing, same thing, and even worse, and even worse. And now
Mm.
all of a sudden now everyone was like, well, Veronica wasn't so bad, she wasn't so bad. I wish she made the second round. And it's like, well, yeah, because that's exactly what the media did. When they saw that Veronica was a threat, they put all the focus on her, but
Mm-hmm.
it worked for them. But then they had Pedro Castillo because they completely forgot that he even existed. So yeah, the matter of terruqueo, of fear mongering when it comes to terrorism is very strong with many people, and I think that is something that a lot of the mainstream media really did not do a good job, did not do their job when it came to actually exposing the truth. Rather, they would either stay silent or they would actively, because there's really a lot of mainstream media outlets over there, like PBO, like Willax,
Oh man.
or Panamericana, Canal Dos, Canal Cuatro, who actively actively, this is the actual media. This is not like Fox News or something. No, this is like the active mainstream media. This is as if CNN, that's considered very mainstream, was and very centrist, was saying that there is a terrorist regime going on. So it is something that we cannot disregard, that we have. And that's why I also thank you for this, because the amount of misinformation that is spread when it comes to fear mongering, and also when it comes to fear mongering in regards to the economy, because that's another thing that they say, is that with any left wing regime, we're going to have mass inflation like in the 80s when we had Alan Garcia, or that we're going to have mass migration like Venezuelans, which also happened in the 80s in Peru. That's another thing, the economic fear mongering that they also are giving us. It's tremendous. Yeah.
Mm.
And I do want to add that, it doesn't just keep people away from, voting electorally, but it does incite violence. It does justify violence, violence by groups like El Grupo Colina. And there's a lot of people living in the DC area that have had to flee because of persecution, and even have family members that have been attacked. So, it's definitely really concerning.
Yeah. So I want to share some articles and get your thoughts on what was said here. First, we'll start off with, I would say, the bad, I guess, that Ben Norton put out. So let me put the article up real quick. Let me zoom in here. All right. So he said Peru's president, Castillo, had a falling out with his socialist Peru Libre party. It now refuses to give a vote of confidence to his new cabinet. It warns of a clear political turn of the government and its cabinet towards the center right, with neoliberal operatives funded by US NGOs. So, something that the mainstream media in Peru was saying is that this guy here, Vladimir Cerron, who is the leader of Peru Libre, was pulling the strings of Pedro Castillo. Well, if he's distancing himself from the party, well, that pretty much debunks a lot of the stuff that they were saying, that he was going to be a puppet for Vladimir Cerron. But nonetheless, we were hoping that Castillo could be more left wing. So Benorin goes on to say Peru's new president, Pedro Castillo, has been gradually moving to the right. Spain's state backed media outlet EFE praised Castillo for distancing himself from the Socialist Peru Libre Party and reinforcing the moderate wing of the government. Peru's President Castillo fired Socialist Prime Minister Guaido Bellido and remade his cabinet with numerous centrists. This has led former supporters in the leftist Peru Libre Party to accuse Castillo of betrayal. Just 3 months in, it's not looking good. The leader of the Socialist Peru Libre Party comments on the souring relationships with Pedro Castillo. Peru Libre hasn't passed over to the opposition. It remains at the side of the people and is against the U.S. NGOs that have taken over the cabinet. So, Hugo and Nicolas, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I like the nuance that he was able to add to it because it is a little complex. For one, since the start of the second round, we've always made it clear that Pedro Castillo is not really a left winger. He comes from Alejandro Toledo's party, which is a center, some even say center right party. But he did, along with the teachers union movement that he led, form a coalition party with Peru Libre, and he has allied himself with the left. Now there were ministers from the Bellido cabinet that have been replaced. But having said that, the new ministry is a left-wing cabinet. Mirta Vasquez, she's a left-winger. She's from the party Frente Amplio. And I feel like she's a proven leader with experience. I'll pass it over to Nico.
You know how we were talking earlier a few minutes ago about right wing fear mongering? Well, this is like left wing fear mongering,
Left wing
I'd say.
fear.
Yeah. There's just this. I think it's part of the culture in Peru too. There's always this massive negativity in our society when it comes to politics. It's incredible. It's amazing. It really is. It happens all the time. And in this case, when Bellido came along, the prime minister who was kind of not appointed by Cerron, but kind of recommended to the president by Cerron. They're really close. When Bellido came along, he was an appointment that I did not like. Peru Libre is a more dogmatic, in a sense. Also, they call Marxist-Leninist party. Now, I don't say there's anything wrong with that. I don't particularly agree with everything that a Marxist-Leninist party says, especially with the part that has to be very dogmatic about certain things. I'm more of a innovator, a progressive person.
Yeah.
Now, in that sense, I didn't find Bellido to be the adequate guy there. But you know what I said? I said, this is the government that has won. This is our people's government. They deserve a chance, especially because they're going to receive massive attacks from the right wing and from even the centrist media. The right wing media and the centrist media and everyone are going to be they're going to try to deceive people, and people are going to go out and they're going to try to have this government be completely destroyed. And so we need to support the president. We need to support the prime minister. We need to support Bellido. And in a sense, I don't think he did a bad job. I think Bellido did a good job in certain areas. For example, there was this huge protest in Cusco, one of the main cities, the imperial city in Peru. And the man went there, on horseback. He talked in Quechua to the protesters, and everything, was eventually solved. Everything came to an agreement. So, and also when it came to the attacks of the media and things like that, he showed a lot of strength, a lot of muscle, in defending, the policies of change. So I originally said I might have been a skeptic of Bellido, but I do think he did a good job. Now, same thing here with Mirta Vasquez, especially us who are supposed to be left wing, who are supposed to be with the united with this process of change. We can't be shooting our own feet. We have to remain together, give the woman a chance, give
Mm.
the new ministers a chance, and let the president govern. Just like I have asked of my Peruvian counterparts from all sides of the spectrum, I've actively always said, if you keep criticizing that this man is incapable, that this man is this or that he doesn't, he can't improvise a speech, he can't even read, blah blah blah, because that's some of the things that they say. Um, to criticize the president. Well, why don't you, with all your talents, with all your knowledge, why don't all of us, let's help him out? This is
Mm.
Castillo. It's a good man. It's a man with principles. He obviously isn't, a genius. He's not Rafael Correa of Ecuador. He's not Luis Arce of Bolivia, but he's someone who has he's a patriot with the best interests of the country at heart. And anyone and everyone, he's our president. We should support him, especially if we are left wingers, especially if we're here for a process of change. He is our man, our best option. And Mirta Vasquez, that's our woman, our best option right now. Let's stop shooting ourselves in the feet and let's get together and work for the best interests of our country, because that is what we need to do. I called for unity when the attacks from the right came in. Now, same here. That is what we need with these attacks from the left. Stop looking at your own, private interests, because things aren't going all the way that you want them to go, and do things for the contribute what you can for the success of this government, because the success of the Castillo government will be the success of left-wing policies in Peru, something that we haven't had in a long time.
Yeah, I agree that this could be like jumping the gun, and like it's still too early, and like you said, we should give some time to see how they all perform, and if at worst things aren't going the way that we wanted them to as left wingers, then we can just stand in solidarity together and demand for things to improve. But it's way too early, in my opinion. And now here's something that surprised me a little bit, because I remember when I was with, I believe with Ramiro Sebastian Funes, I saw that I saw an article, and Ramiro presented this article that Castillo said no Chavismo here, and he was distancing himself a lot from Chavez. I could understand that it may be because there's a lot of negative media out, not a lot of negative press out there about Venezuela. There's a lot of migrants from Venezuela that go to Peru. Now Peru and Venezuela are reestablishing diplomatic relations, um, at the highest level here, which is what this says. So it's good that they're um, they're improving relationships with each other. Like the Venezuela again, who is a country that is under President Nicolas Maduro, under sanctions, and these countries, these left wing countries, need to stand together in solidarity against the oppressive Western countries that are sanctioning them. So I want to get your thoughts on that. What do you think about how they're improving relationships with Venezuela?
I mean, I personally definitely see some patients there as well. I think Peru historically hasn't really reached out to different left-wing countries. I feel like even with Ollantumala, then Marco Ayana from Frente Amplio, I don't really feel like there's an integration into the pink tide for Peru. And even now with Pedro Castillo appointing Oscar Mahuarta, who again, he's Alejandro Toledo type. He's a centrist. He's an establishment figure. I just kind of see that, I fear that there might be some that will continue. Now, having said that, there are some excellent ambassadors have been appointed in a bunch of different countries, including the U.S. I believe in the U.S. we recently was appointed Oswald de Libero, who's got a book, the myth of development. And this man, he's a real leftist, and I know that's it's not limited to the U.S. I know in Bolivia, there's a woman who was appointed there as well, whose name I'm blanking on. But there's a bunch of different countries throughout the world that we have gotten leftists, to occupy the embassy. So there is some great, but again, there's always a little nuance there.
Uh, I don't know why this is such a big deal. Really, it's only a big deal because the media makes it a big deal. Really, Venezuela has one president, and the president is Maduro, whether we like it or not. That's reality. Guaido was the president of the assembly, and his term has expired. Like literally, he's no one right now. He's just a citizen, and he can protest and do what he wants because that's his rights. That's that.
Hmm.
Now I'm not a fan of the Maduro regime. Obviously, yeah, there is an economic difficulties. How do you say embargo in Venezuela when it comes to them being able to purchase medicines, being able to do imports. There's sanctions on them, but then there also is a lot of guilt from the Maduro regime when it comes to its policies. There are a lot of just in my opinion, he is the equivalent of Manuel Noriega in Panama. Chavez to me is like Omar Torrijos was in Panama, and Maduro is what Manuel Noriega was then in Panama. Basically someone who came in and completely mishandled and then destroyed the legacy of a great revolutionary and all his deeds, all of his good works. Now, whether we like Maduro or not, he's the president. I don't like Ivan Duque of Colombia, but he's the president, And what's normal is that we have established relationships, institutional relationships with the other leaders that are around the world. So that's it. But obviously, this has been politicized around the world by the media and by all the right wingers. Saying, "Oh, it's such a big deal," and that's that. And also, to what Hugo was saying about Maurta, I don't think it's such a bad thing. Martua, obviously, I preferred the one before, Bejar, but let's not forget though that under the Toledo government, UNASUR became that was its initial project. The South American integration. It was between Toledo and Lula da Silva of Brazil, and the not chancellor. Well, I guess that's what they call it. He's not really a chancellor, but the person in charge of foreign policy was Maurtua. So. I'd say let's we're saying it's too early to start judging,
Hmm.
but I wouldn't be so negative in when it comes to foreign policy either. This is obviously a good signal, because Castillo is not following the Washington playbook of international politics. He's doing basically what common sense is. And if he actually, also aligns himself with, I think he will, with the governments of, Bolivia or of Argentina, Mexico, then that will be an even better signal. So I think we should stay calm, stay calm.
Yeah. Yeah. So you think that Chavez was a more competent president than Maduro?
um, well, Chavez, he let's not forget that there's a reason why people adored him. People didn't
Yeah.
fear him. People, I mean, obviously, his opponents did,
Yeah.
but people, for the majority of his regime, and even after that, people still remember him fondly. Like I've talked to many Venezuelans, and they remember, they detest Maduro, but they remember him fondly, and there's a reason for that because Chavez, he was someone who gave a massive portion of Venezuela who had been forgotten for many decades. He gave them education. He made public education free. University education. He made it free. He taught them how to read. He had a literacy campaign. You know why there was half of Venezuela that would then vote consistently for Chavez? Because that half of Venezuela before was not registered to vote, and was
Hmm.
not registered to vote because in order to be registered to vote, you needed to know how to read, and they did not know how to read. And so Chavez went there, and he with his literacy campaigns. Then with the misiones, Misión Rivas, Barrio Adentro, Vivienda, Robinson, Niño Jesus, he provided, free health clinics to the poor, and health clinics that were open to anyone really. It wasn't just the poor. And same thing, with education, he gave education to even the older adults who hadn't finished their degrees or their studies, things like that. And also he invested, the old wealth into building infrastructure. Obviously there was mass corruption. Obviously there were errors that were made in planning. There was one of the reasons why Venezuela is in such a dire state as well is because 95% of their income was on the oil revenue. And with that all tanked, it all went to hell. That's
Mhm.
basically what happened. And obviously, it's part of his mistakes to not being able to diversify the economy. That's one of the proposals that we in Nuevo Peru, with Hugo, with Veronica, had, diversify the Peruvian economy so we don't depend on just on one source of wealth. And that's something that we hope Castillo will do, because the fear mongering of Venezuela, well, one of the reasons too is because they didn't diversify their economy. So things like
Mhm.
that. And unfortunately, Maduro, yeah, I don't think he was as competent in being able to face and solve those problems. Instead, he was more focused in maintaining power, which then led to him corrupting his own soul and oppressing, the mass protests, instead of saying, you know what, so be it. If I can't handle this, I'll leave. We saw this in Nicaragua. Nicaragua, Ortega lost in 1990. And then 17 years later, he came back. He won free and fair elections afterwards. Now he's another story. But that's a clear example that, if you can't handle things, just go. Chavez did that in 2004. He had a referendum on whether he should leave power or not, and he won. Maduro should have done the same exact thing instead of trying to cling to power, which eventually brought in even darker and worse consequences. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
And Hugo, you got to meet Pedro Castillo, right? And believe like a couple weeks ago. How was that experience like?
I mean, yeah, that it was awesome. He came he stayed in DC at the Mayflower, and afterwards he came and got to meet all his supporters, everyone from Nuevo Peru, Juntos por el Perú, and Peru Libre, his base, at this very humble Peruvian place in Alexandria. I wish I remember the name so I could give him a shout out, because although it doesn't look like the most beautiful place, the food was incredible. Um, but yeah, even when he came down, I believe it was Wheelax that came down as well. ATV, a lot of different
Really?
Peruvian. Yeah, and they broadcasted it. And I want to talk a little bit about the way that they try to frame things. Because Bruno, you were outside the Mayflower. You saw how we had dozens. I believe it was 80 to 90 people that
That's
showed
a
up to
lot.
support the president, and there was five, I guess, Fujimoristas or
Oh, earlier there was like
anti-Castillo
about
protesters.
12. Like before you got there, there's like about 12 of them, and they were just shouting a lot of nonsense.
Yeah,
They were saying like
Pedro.
Peru's amazing, like capitalism is amazing. It brought McDonald's to Peru. They were saying other things like that. But
And
did you get to ask Castillo any questions?
so we had three people that got to ask questions. I was not one of them, but afterwards we all celebrated. I was actually right in front of it. That was a really cool moment. I mean, to go back to what we're saying, one of the news shows, they printed out an article, which they picture. They also had a video, and they posted a tweet about it previously. But the article had a picture, and it was just five Fujimoristas. In the background, you have us, and they try to, I guess, play optics and it seemed like everyone that showed up was against Castillo. So I feel like that just shows you very in your face about the way that media tries to manipulate the reality of things in Peru.
Yeah. All right. Nicolas and Hugo, you guys want to leave a final message to everybody before we end here?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just thanks a lot for this opportunity. You know, if I hope that maybe one time you want to invite me up again,
Yeah.
uh, and yeah, really keep doing what you're doing. Don't end up like the Young Turks. That's the only thing.
No way.
Don't end up like
That
the
won't
Young Turks.
happen.
We as the road ahead is not easy, but that's what tests your character. So always stay brave and stay strong. And I hope to be here again if I get a chance to. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd love to invite both of you guys here again. Whenever there's another election in Peru, we can live stream it. We can all share our thoughts and everything. But yeah, Hugo, what do you think?
Yeah, that would be great. And yeah, thank you again, not only for inviting us, for organizing the event in front of the OAS, and also I wanted to plug in Los Ronderos de las Redes, which is a group that a couple of young Peruvians living abroad have put together to make sure that we try to show information, try to make sure that we network together so that any Peruvians that are trying to inform people about the reality going on there have a place to write whatever they need, share whatever they need. So try to check us out there. I think we're going to be posting a class or an introduction to Jose Carlos Mariátegui that Luis Carate, a journalist who helped us with. And again, thanks.
All right, Nico and Hugo, thank you very much for being on the show. And everybody else, you're not alone, and I know you'll stay informed. Take care, everyone.